Today, I am so excited to be joined by Jacqueline Ko, who serves as ambassador for OMF and OMF Canada. So, for those of you who don't know, Jacqueline is a multi-award winning Canadian performer, producer, and disability advocate. And she's also known for her roles in opera theater, musical theater, and film, and is also the founding artistic director of Opera Mariposa, which happens to be Canada's first fully disability-run opera company. Welcome, Jacqueline. So great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Great. I was wondering if we could start just talking a little bit about yourself. So people that may be new to the space or may not know who you are, if you could just tell us a little bit about your personal journey with ME/CFS. So what brought you here? So I know that you have had this since you were just 6 years old. So what was it like to go through this and go through that diagnostic process at such a young age?
Well, actually, at first I didn't know that I had ME. When I was 6 and I came down with pneumonia, was diagnosed with mono and then Epstein-Barr. Um, and then, I was sick for a few months, and then as far as I knew, I was better.
Mm.
And I just thought, okay, I was sick and, carried on, I guess you could say. With the benefit of hindsight and knowing what I know now, there were some things that I had some trouble with. There were some things that I now recognize as symptoms, a certain amount of pain and things like that never really fully went away. But, at the time I didn't think of anything of it. And then when I was 10 years old, I was injured in gym class and my health just kind of completely collapsed.
Wow.
And it it was quite hard, I'd say. I was very lucky that I had, parents who really advocated for me and took it seriously. And they looked for answers. As it happens, my sister also has ME, and she
Wow.
was diagnosed a bit before my relapse. So we, at least, we had it helped point us in the right direction for me. So without her having been sick, it probably would have taken us quite a bit longer for me to get a diagnosis, because, at the time we didn't necessarily, doctors hadn't necessarily even heard of ME. Because, yeah, the doctors didn't necessarily know what they were looking at that time, because there was just not a lot of recognition of it as an illness then.
That it must have just been so difficult because, like you said, doctors might, they might not have even heard what ME/CFS was. Being at such a young age and having to describe that must have just been such a difficult experience.
Oh yeah.
Did your sister, I'm curious if your sister presented similarly or what that was like between you both?
I'd say fairly similarly. She had her, in her case, she was diagnosed after she had I think it was pertussis, and
Mm,
that's what set it off for her. So it was slightly different path, I guess you could say, because mine was after
sure.
an injury. Um,
Right.
yeah, but I think early days the symptoms were fairly similar. I mean, to be perfectly honest, my memory's a little foggy on some of the early stuff because it was quite a long time ago and I
Right.
was very sick. So,
Sure. I mean, there's often just this false notion that ME/CFS only affects people over the age of 40, right? But as can be seen in your case, that's just not true. And there's so many undocumented cases of pediatric ME/CFS, for example, and now it's just only growing with long COVID. I'm wondering, so when you, after going through all of this, you were very sick, what was it like to just continue, for example, the school journey and go through just being a young adult living through this?
I mean, it was very hard. I'm just gonna say that up front.
Yeah.
It was, it was difficult because um there is a sort of assumption, both internal and external, that you can get better if you just push through. You're too young to be sick forever.
Mhm.
That sort of uh that sort of thing. Um I did continue attending school for a couple years. I would miss days or
Hmm.
potentially weeks, and then I decided to do only half days, and I really wanted to continue attending school. I didn't want to fall behind.
Right.
Also this was in the days before social media and such, so school was how I would see my friends.
Sure.
And so I really wanted to just keep going to school and sort of get back to normal, I guess you could
Right.
say. Yeah. And like I said, I was very lucky that my parents advocated for me, and that included explaining things to my teachers,
Mm,
explaining these are her needs. Some days she might not be able to do things. Some days she might have to say I can't do gym class. But it was also it was quite hard in the sense that I had to be the one making that decision. I had to be the one in the classroom saying, actually, I can't do this today. And
mhm.
it's quite hard to at that age to be your own advocate in that way.
Yes.
Um, and it did reach a point when I was 12 where continuing to attend school was just an impossibility. And so I did drop out. I really didn't want to, but I was at the point where I couldn't sit up by myself anymore.
Wow.
So there was no way to keep going basically, and it was very hard. It was very isolating. Like I said, no social media. I don't think I even had a laptop then. Uh
Wow.
so like, you know, and I just went through a real period there where I didn't want to talk about it. I
Mm,
didn't want to talk about my illness. Because part of, like I said, had to explain it to my teachers. I had to be the one advocating for myself, and I just didn't want to be doing that anymore, I guess you could say. Um, and so I I didn't like talking about it. I didn't like, it was always a thing that I knew I'd have to explain it again. As it was known more by the term chronic fatigue syndrome at that time too. So there was also that element of explanation of no, I don't just get tired,
right.
having to
Right.
explain what the illness was actually like, and what some of the symptoms were. Um, it was also very hard because at that point I was very sick, and
Mhm.
I couldn't always read
Mm,
because I was so sick. So I couldn't really take the time to learn a lot about my illness,
right.
and I so it was hard. So that also made it hard to continue explaining to people this thing that I didn't really fully understand. Um, so yeah, that was very much what I went through at that point.
Wow.
And but it reached a point when I was 17. That was when I held my first fundraiser, actually,
Oh, wow.
because
Very young.
I was I had been through this, I'd had to explain my illness a great deal to a great many people, and I'd gotten tired
Hmm.
of explaining it. As even though I didn't really want to talk about my illness, I thought that maybe if I could raise awareness and raise money for research, then maybe someday I wouldn't have to keep explaining it.
Right. Right. So that's amazing that you're able to do that. So what brought you to that? So first, like, how did you discover and explore this passion? So when did you first get into the world of opera, and what was that like? And how, if you could just walk us through a little bit of that journey.
Well, I was always involved in music in some capacity.
Hmm.
I started piano lessons, I think, around age 4,
Wow.
and all through school, I sang in the choir. I was in the school band and all of that. And when I was 10, I was interested in taking voice lessons. And my best friend, Robin Hahn, who uh, is also co-founder of Opera Mariposa, she had just started taking voice lessons. So she gave me the name and number of her voice teacher. And so I'd taken, I think, something like 3 lessons actually before I had my relapse.
Oh, wow.
And so when I after my relapse, I did try to keep attending school, and I did take voice lessons. And it was one lesson a month, one every few months, depending. Um, and again, we did have to explain to my voice teacher,
Right.
what about my health, and I've been very lucky that my teachers have always been very flexible and very understanding of what my needs were. Um, and even when I reached the point where, school was an impossibility, I
Hmm.
couldn't, there's no way to attend school
Right.
enough to, be making progress at school.
Right.
1 hour of singing a month or every few months was something that I could do. And, it it wasn't it wasn't weekly or anything,
Mm.
and I would take breaks within that 1 hour, every 10 or 15 minutes I'd sit down or lie down. And yeah, it's and sometimes I would have to sing sitting down or lying down, but it was
Sure.
something that I could do.
So you're able to make space for that even within the constraints of this chronic
Yes.
illness that you were living with.
Yes.
So then as you got further on into your life, and you really started pursuing this, I know it as a career as well. So what were the challenges that you faced while pursuing this career in opera while being also a person living with this condition? And how did you overcome these?
I mean, I'm not sure if I'd use the word overcome. There were always challenges. Like I said, I was very lucky that my teachers have always been very supportive
Hmm.
and very understanding. And one of the things is I also consider myself lucky that I knew going in that
Right.
my career wasn't necessarily going to be on, the traditional path, that it would have to be based around what I could do.
Hmm.
Um, and my teachers supported that, my career wasn't necessarily going to look like getting a degree and then
Right.
applying to young artist programs around the world or anything like that.
Right.
There are still barriers that I encounter within the opera world. Usually, things like I said, I can't necessarily travel around the world to go to all the
Mm.
young artist programs or to apply to wherever. Um, I also, it's things like rehearsal schedules. I look at a rehearsal schedule when the audition notice, if they post the rehearsal schedule with the audition notice, and I say, I can't do that many days in a row. I can't do rehearsals that are that long,
Hmm.
so I know that I just can't apply for that production then.
Right.
Um, but and that's actually part of how Opera Mariposa came to be.
Hmm.
Was it was a way for us to make productions that were accessible to me.
What you've done is amazing. You've created a space for people with disabilities to participate in this and to advocate for others like you who want to participate in their passions in a way that's safe and comfortable for themselves.
I was 20 when we
Wow.
founded Opera Mariposa.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
it's 10 years ago now. Uh,
Oh, congratulations.
oh, thank you. Robin and I founded the company together 10 years ago, and it at the time we called it um an opera company by young artists for young artists.
Mm.
Um, but part of the plan was always to continue doing fundraisers and benefit and awareness shows, and we have continued those for the past decade.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and it was, I think, I mean, in a lot of ways, when I found opera, sort of, what I say is like, I found opera and I never looked back. um, and I think founding Mariposa felt a little like that too. It
Mhm.
felt like a natural next step in the things that I wanted to do.
So it's in a way, it's almost like it found you. That's amazing. So it's been 10 years that you've been doing these. And what do you feel like it's been like to educate general public through these fundraisers? Do you feel like this has been a platform for you to really raise awareness for people that might have no idea what MECFS is?
Absolutely. I mean, there were people who I'd known who, you know, they were people I knew in a professional capacity who then they might not even have known that I was disabled initially when I knew them because we knew each other from having done one show or whatever. And they discovered that I was disabled when I started doing benefit and awareness shows, and they learned, I think, a great, and like, so I've had people who knew me only in a professional capacity ask start asking questions about my illness, start asking about, what it's like, and just really taking that on board once I started talking about it more, and when if they saw me talking about it in interviews like this or on
Right.
stage at our benefit, at our benefit and awareness shows, and
Yeah.
yeah, and including people I'd known for some time who
Mm-hmm.
had sort of there was I've seen sort of a, I guess you could say, a difference in reaction, a difference in sort of in the way they think about how this illness affects me, what
Mm-hmm.
things mean in terms of exertion,
Right.
in terms of things like that. And I have seen that reaction from people. And I think the most remarkable thing I've seen is that other people with the illness who've gotten in touch with us because they saw that we were doing a show, a
Wow.
benefit and an awareness show, and some people who'd never seen one done for this cause before.
That's so
And
powerful to be able to connect with other people. I'm sure even like outside of the Vancouver area, which is where you're based, that are able to.
yes, um, there was an author who got in touch with us.
Oh,
She's from, I believe, Alberta. I feel like I
wow.
should know this, and I don't. Her name's Valerie Free, and she actually got in touch with us, and she was writing a book collecting stories from people with ME, and
That's
so I was featured in her book.
that's
um,
amazing. So so then I'm wondering when you were able to educate these people, or maybe people that had known you for a long time, kind of like how you were saying before, you didn't want to explain it all the time. So these shows were a platform for you to not have to anymore. This was a way to do it in a large scale setting. So do you feel that a lot of people, from the outside, were they unaware of what MECFS even was?
yes, there was. I mean, things have changed somewhat over since the time since I've had Emmy, and since Mariposa's been founded. I have seen changes overall, um, and organizations like OMF are part of that, and increasing awareness. And it more and more I'm coming across doctors who have at least heard of the illness.
That's one
Um,
step forward.
yeah. Um, and like one of the big things, for me, it has made a big difference for me personally, in the sense that I am very out about my illness now. Um, and it means that sometimes, I do talk about it, and I've gotten more, I guess you could say, casual in how I talk about it,
Mhm.
in that I will just reference my health and reference my illness. And then sometimes people haven't known me that long. They're like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And,
Right.
but it's made it sort of, I think for me personally, it's made it easier to have that conversation, that I can just
Sure.
be willing to talk about it that casually.
Right. And do you feel like social media in a way has helped that too with our conversation?
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. Because, for those of us who spend a lot of time not necessarily able to leave the house, not necessarily able to, really interact with people face to face, it has allowed us to continue communicating with people.
right. And for the first time, we have it, especially
Yeah.
during long COVID, I think, or during
Yes.
COVID. And I think that's just been such a huge thing as well, is that these people that started to get COVID and then not recover, they were able to find the MECFS community online.
Yes. Yeah, and it's helped. Yeah, and just that sense of community has.
Fostering that, because as you
Yeah.
said, like when you were younger, you didn't necessarily have that. Just
Yeah.
how much, I can't even imagine how much more difficult that is not to have that sense of community. So lastly, I'm wondering if there's anything that you could share about what you've been up to lately, maybe with Opera Mariposa or even on your own pursuits.
I've been exploring some new music, learning some new repertoire. I'm always working on stuff behind the scenes at Opera Mariposa. Um, I I'm honored to have been awarded a lifetime honorary membership by one of Open Medicine Foundation Canada's strategic partner organizations, the MEFM Society of BC.
That's
Um,
amazing. That is
Yeah.
amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. But if people want to hear about announcements, projects, or anything, you can find me at jacquelineco.com and operamariposa.com.
Yeah.
And you can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Bandcamp, Spotify, and iTunes. So.
And we'll link those as well for everyone who's watching to stay in touch with everything that Jacqueline is up to, as well as Opera Mariposa. We'll share that with you, and we'll continue sharing updates from you, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to have you and to learn more about your journey and all of the incredible advocacy work you do. And it is Triple Giving Tuesday for Open Medicine Foundation, which means that from now up until November 29th, all donations will be tripled. So if you'd like to support the effort to advance research and medical education of ME/CFS, long COVID, and related multi-system chronic complex diseases, now is the time. Thank you again, Jacqueline.